Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the Lenovo C940-15. We looked at their smaller 14-inch a few weeks ago. This is the larger one that also incorporates an Nvidia GPU. This one's got a GTX 1650 inside with 4 gigs of video RAM. And like many 2-in-1s, you can flip it around into display mode here. You can use it like a tablet, a big heavy one, or put it up in tent mode if you want. And of course, it's got the touch screen built in as well, but you've got the GPU on board that'll give you better graphics performance for gaming and video editing and a few other things. And there's a lot to look at here with this particular computer, which we're going to be getting into in just a second. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, this is on loan from Lenovo. So when we're done with this, it goes back to them. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor is anyone reviewing it or approving it before it is uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this laptop is all about. Now, the price point on this one starts at around $1,200 and goes up from there. The good news is, at least at the time I'm recording this video, that the entry-level model that is around $1,200 does have the GTX 1650 GPU built in, so that's a good thing. So let's dive in and take a closer look now at the hardware. Again, 15-inch display here. This one was configured with the 1080p display. Touch, of course, so you can use it in tablet and display mode. HDR, pretty bright as well. So for a 1080p display, it looks pretty good here on this system. But if you want something higher resolution, I do believe there's a 4K version available too. But that will come at the cost of battery life, so just keep that in mind as you are doing your shopping there. Inside, this one has an i7-9750H processor. It's got that GTX 1650 GPU. It has 16 gigabytes of RAM, but the RAM is soldered onto the motherboard. You cannot upgrade the RAM. You can, though, upgrade the hard drive on it. This one has a 512 gigabyte Intel SSD with integrated Optane. This is one of the Optane H10 drives. Now, the Optane drive is designed to speed up kind of the everyday tasks that most consumers do. So if you're loading up applications, you'll see them spring up a little bit quicker, especially the ones you load all the time. Your boot up time might be a little less versus a computer without the Optane technology. So there are some good things about it. But do take a look at some of the reviews out there about the Optane H10s, because there are some trade-offs versus a traditional NVMe from a performance standpoint, but it's not anything that I think most consumers should really be concerned about here. Weight on this one is 4.41 pounds or 2 kilograms, and that's with the 1080p display. So it's a bit on the heavy side, but it is a 15-inch laptop, so you sometimes get a little bit more bulk there. But I was really impressed with the overall build quality. It just feels very elegant. It's just nicely constructed. There's nothing that looks out of place on it. It really just has a nice, smooth feel. It's all metal, of course. You've got this really nice hinge mechanism on the center here with an integrated Atmos soundbar. The sound is great on it. Very nice spatiality, good range of sound, good stereo separation. So it's a really nice multimedia laptop for doing web conferences, but also watching movies and maybe listening to music too. You don't get a deep bass out of the speakers, but it does sound pretty decent compared to many other laptops that I've looked at. It sounds the best, though, when you're in the laptop configuration where the speakers are pointed right at you. You do get a little bit of a degradation in quality when you've got it in this mode, because the speakers are pointing downwards in this configuration. But as a laptop, it sounds pretty darn nice. The keyboard is also very nice on it. You've got your traditional Lenovo layout here, good key separation, decent travel on the keys. It is backlit. You get the number pad also, which is what the larger laptops allow you to squeeze in there, so that's good. You got a fingerprint reader here. It does not support face recognition, though, and a really nice trackpad. This is one of the nicest trackpads I've seen on a Windows laptop so far this year. Very happy with that as well. For ports, you've got a couple worth looking at. Your power goes in here. It's a 135-watt power adapter required for this one. And then you've got 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports here that will also work, of course, with USB Type-C devices. However, I noticed these 2 ports do not charge the laptop, so you have to, at least for me, in my testing, plug in the power adapter in order to charge it. But both of these ports will do data in and out, as well as video out. And of course, you can drive 4K 60 Hertz displays with one of these. Next to it, you've got a traditional headphone microphone jack. And then on the other side, you just have a single USB 3.0 port and your power button. But you also have another cool feature, which we'll explore in a few minutes, which is a garaged pen. And the pen sits right in there. It charges up when it's docked to the unit here. And you've always got a pen with you that you can use with the large 15-inch display. And we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. So really nice package here overall. Battery life, we're looking at about 9 to 9.5 hours, which isn't bad. If you start using that GPU, the battery life will go down quite a bit. So that 9.5 hour figure is going to be for word processing, Excel maybe, doing a little email, maybe a movie or something. But once you start pushing the hardware a bit for more higher end tasks like video editing, you'll see that battery life drop quite a bit. So let's take a look now at its performance. We'll load up the Chrome web browser here and go to the nasa.gov homepage just to get a feel for how things spring up on a Wi-Fi connection. And as you can see here, things render in pretty fast, even on a multimedia-rich site here. It's performing as I would expect it to. And we also booted up the Edge browser to take a look at high frame rate video on YouTube. We loaded up my 1080p 60 frames per second drone video. That worked just fine, no drop frames. We do, though, of course, see some drop frames on Google Chrome because they still have not yet optimized Google Chrome for the Intel video hardware. I like to bring this up every once in a while because it still hasn't been fixed after all of these years. I was not able to get HDR video to work correctly with Netflix. It's not detecting the HDR display, at least on the 1080p version here, but it is detecting the Atmos sound, so you will get all of that surround sound out of that sound bar on Netflix here because it is able to detect that. You'll want, though, of course, to use the Windows Netflix app and not just go to the website, but it was pretty neat to see that there built right in. And on the browserbench.org speedometer test, we got a score of 175.7 on version 2.0 of that test and 101 on version 1.0. That puts this machine a little bit under what we've seen from other similar laptops with the same processor. But as you'll see in a few minutes, this one does do better when it's under load for sustained periods of time. And that might be why we're seeing a slight difference in score here. But for things that most people do with a laptop, you're not going to notice much of a difference. All right, so let's take the pen out of the garage here and see how everything works. One thing I'm noticing with the pen is that it needs to be pretty close to the screen in order for it to ignore other input. And when you are putting your entire arm on this big display, you'll find, like right now, that once you go between words and maybe lift your pen up for a second, it might lose track of the pen and then start picking up input from your arm. So you're going to want to keep that pen super close as you're writing. That was my only real frustration with this, is that it loses track of that pen pretty quickly, even if it's not that far off the display. Another thing to be mindful of are the buttons here on the pen. They're right where you're going to sometimes rest your thumb, so it's possible to hit those inadvertently as well. But the pen does have decent pressure detection. It's got 4,096 levels here, so you can see as I push the pen down harder, I get a thicker line, and when I go lighter here, it is a thinner line. This is OneNote, so I'm sure there are other applications that might make better use of the pressure detection, but it does have that pressure detection here, and I do like how conveniently the pen stores itself inside of the computer's case here. So let's move on now to gaming. Remember, we got the 1650 GPU on board, and we saw some pretty good performance out of the games that we tried on it. We'll begin first with a simpler one, Rocket League, about 130 frames per second at the highest settings, so no issues there. Fortnite at epic settings, 1080p, about 45 to 65 frames per second, depending on what was going on in the game. On GTA 5, when we used the DirectX 10 at highest settings, 1080p, we were getting between 70 and 85 frames per second. Witcher 3 at ultra settings at 1080p, between 50 and 60 frames per second. And on the 2016 version of Doom, yes, we got to get the new one now, ultra settings, we were getting about 60 to 80 frames per second while we were battling some of the enemies in that game. So overall, really good performance out of the GPU here. And we found that it's pretty close to what you might see out of the GTX 1060 from a year or two ago. And on the VRMark TimeSpy Benchmark test, we got a score of 3,329. and that puts its graphics performance very close to what we saw out of a desktop computer about a year ago with laptop guts inside, the Shuttle XPC X1 that had a GTX 1060 on board, very close to that 1060 in overall performance. But also take a look at the Asus TUF that we looked at about a week ago. That computer costs about half of what this one costs and gets very similar performance out of its GPU because it's got the very same GPU that this one has inside. So if you're willing to give up build quality, battery life, touch displays, nicer displays, you can often get similar performance out of something that costs a lot less. But when you pay more for a premium laptop, you do get better features like a higher quality display, better speakers, and build quality, for example. But if those things are not important to you, you certainly can match and sometimes exceed what you're getting out of an expensive laptop by giving up some of the creature comforts that one of these premium machines might give you. Now, we also ran the VRMark Orange Room to see how well it might do in virtual reality. There we got a score of 4,712, and that's a good score, which means it can drive an Oculus headset or an HTC Vive at the 90 frames per second it needs. However, that would be for very basic VR applications. It'll really struggle with some of the more demanding titles that are on the way. So this is really a bare minimum VR machine. You might want to look at something powered by a 2060 if you want a somewhat affordable laptop that can drive your VR headset. Now, I was very impressed with its thermal performance. As you can see here on screen, we got a score of 99.20% on the VRMark stress test. And what that test does is it stresses the CPU and GPU with a pretty demanding test over and over again to see if the computer gets too hot and has to slow down. This one largely didn't throttle here. It's a very, very good score. And the fan isn't all that loud or offensive either. So they've really got a good, finely tuned system here that seems to be working quite nicely. And you'll also notice that it is able to run Linux. I am having some trouble getting it to detect the GPU, unfortunately. We're running 19.10 right now, but it does get the Intel video up here without issue. Sound is working, Wi-Fi is working, Bluetooth is working, so a lot of the basics here on Linux are functioning, and I might defer to some of my Linux experts out there on some things we might want to try to get the GPU functioning, but overall, it is a pretty zippy Linux experience here, but we are again having some issues with the video detection for the GPU. So keep that in mind. Probably not the best Linux experience at the moment, but it does seem to boot it up at least, and it detects most of the hardware. Now, that error message you saw pop up was about the Nvidia GPU, so we've got to do a little bit more work on Linux here. But as a Windows machine, it's great. It performs well. You've got the GPU on board for gaming and video editing tasks and that sort of thing. Love the two Thunderbolt ports there. I love just the fit and finish of it. It's one of the nicest feeling laptops I've used in a while. Just really nice design here, really high quality metal. It just feels premium along with that nice soundbar and hinge here. So it's a really good premium laptop if you're in the market for that sort of thing, and I think you'll be quite happy with the things you'll be able to do with this. It is a little bit bulkier and heavier than other laptops, but you do have the 15-inch display and the onboard GPU with relatively quiet cooling. And I think all of those things together make this one something to definitely take a look at. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Rick Vestudo, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.